help women, save lives, and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. And she just came out. She told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. We had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I'm Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. And we are going to cover some important statistics that you need to know as we talk about Planned Parenthood's annual report. That is the topic of today's podcast, and we will cover all of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. What it means, what it does not mean. There's some interpretations of this report that are a little inaccurate, and so we will cover that. But there is a lot to cover, and so we will get into it. And somebody who has a wonderful annual report every year is Mr. Steve Carlin, who is my co-host on this Planned Parenthood annual report podcast. Steve, happy summer.
Happy summer, Sean. Let's do another podcast on the annual wonderful report that you just talked about me. I think the leaders would love to hear all about that. I don't know what's in it, but I'll find out with them.
Here's the basis of it. So you had a streak. So I lied. You did have a lot of bad annual reports, and I would say life in general, which some of that was covered on the Mother's Day podcast, where you've done like IOUs for your poor wife on Mother's Day. So that's just brutal. I was telling my wife, Mary Lisa, about that to make myself look good in comparison to you, who's and she mentioned, she's like, you're always great at Mother's Day. I was like, yeah, I remember I botched it that one year with the luggage. And she's like, oh yeah, I forgot. So she's like, that's in the past. But here's one of your great improvements, Steve. You don't really complain about weather anymore.
No, I've mortified the flesh, as the saints urge us to do, and yeah.
Is that what it is? Great, that is good to know. We have some dark things to cover today. So I am wearing my Top Gun T-shirt, which my children gave me Father's Day of last year. This represents good news, which is, I believe movies have seasons. Okay. You can't watch Christmas Vacation on like July 4th, and you can't watch Independence Day like Thanksgiving weekend. It just doesn't work. But Top Gun season is coming upon us, as is Saving Private Ryan season, because to me, the Thursday before Memorial Day weekend is the opening of Top Gun season, and it lasts through about, I would say, Labor Day weekend. It's all summer.
Yeah, that's solid. I'll go for that. I'm not a huge movie knowledge guy, as you know, but there's something that just feels right about watching those airplanes in summer. And what was it? Volleyball in the first one, and then football in the second one. It just they're on the beach, they're having a good time. We all want to have a good time.
Yeah, Top Gun 2 was so awesome. It was so awesome. And I wanted it to be awesome. And I had no confidence that it was going to be awesome. And it wasn't woke. I was like, you just think they're going to like make Goose's kid trans or something and just have all that stuff forced on us. And Tom Cruise is just having none of it. And then everybody got mad at him. They tried to cancel Tom Cruise, which I think is actually impossible, because it wasn't woke. People were mad that Top Gun 2 wasn't woke and that America came out the winner, and it had a lot of hand over heart stuff going on. And it's just a fun movie, a total blast. It was awesome. And so people complained, as you mentioned, that it was so much like the first one, just updated. And that is exactly what I wanted, with less cheese, which they did. It was far less cheesy than the first one. So it just delivered on all fronts, and I want to wish you and yours a happy Top Gun season, as that is approaching rapidly right now. Okay. We need to have a good summer. The first thing that we need to mention on this annual report is that it came out recently, but it's not really a recent report. This is 2021 to the beginning of 2022. Is that correct?
Well, Sean, that is actually a surprisingly tricky question to answer, because in this annual report, Planned Parenthood is recording the number of different services according to different timelines. What the heck does that mean? We'll get into the weeds just a little bit to make sense of it. When Planned Parenthood's annual report records the number of contraception clients that it saw during the course of the year, it's defining the year as the fourth quarter of 2021 to the first 3 quarters of 2022. Why? I don't know. I suspect it has something to do with billing and fiscal years and things like that. But when Planned Parenthood is tracking the number of other services, including abortion, it appears it is using exclusively the calendar year of 2022. Why does that matter? It matters because the question on everybody's mind is, what did the overturning of Roe v. Wade do to the number of abortions performed at Planned Parenthood? And we've seen some breathless proclamations in the media sort of heralding that, wow, Planned Parenthood, the number of abortions they did hit a record number post Roe v. Wade, post the Dobbs decision. And I just don't think that we've got data here that supports that conclusion. I don't think we do at all, because we're talking about the calendar year 2022. We've got to remember that half of that year was prior to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And even once Roe v. Wade was overturned in the Dobbs decision, we still saw a lot of different chaos taking place. We saw states implementing pro-life legislation on different timelines and at different paces. We saw injunctions that were blocking that pro-life legislation, and the injunctions were being taken away, and the injunctions were being put in. It was back and forth. It was all over the place. So the bottom line here is, if we want to take a look at what did the overturning of Roe do to the number of abortions provided at Planned Parenthood, I hate to say it, I think we're going to have to wait a while. I think we're going to have to wait until the next year's annual report comes out. And judging by the last few years of annual reports, it could be another year, because Planned Parenthood just seems to take its time getting this document published.
They're not in a hurry. Well,
No.
and to me, it's odd when they release it, because this came out like mid-April.
Something like that, sometime this spring.
Okay. Yeah, it really kind of surprised me, the timing of when they send this thing out, because the primary use of this document for Planned Parenthood is it's a fundraiser. You send out your annual report. This is all, in their minds, the great things that they did, even though it's horrific evil that they did, and send us money. Okay. And 40 Days for Life, every nonprofit has some kind of annual report. We do the Day 41 quarterly magazine, so you're getting updates from us quarterly. And then we do a big recap at the end of the year. But typically these annual reports are done year end to show, hey, we're great. End of year giving is the biggest for all nonprofits, no matter if they're really good or really evil. People are giving away money at the end of the year for tax purposes. And I'm just surprised, Steve, that they released this. I mean, by the time you release it, it kind of gets lost. You're well into May. And once you hit Memorial Day weekend, it's a really bad time, to raise money over the summer for everybody. It's just hard. People they're busy on vacation and all of that. And so donations across the board typically go down in the summer. And this is like when they're just revving up their annual report. So it makes no sense. Like a lot of things that they do, we've said before that they're poorly run. But I believe back in the day, when they had Cecile Richards, who unfortunately, as we've mentioned, was a brilliant CEO for Planned Parenthood, boy, she knew how to raise some money. And the annual report was just this sort of glamorous release. It was always timed around something in the media, or around a certain date. And I didn't understand the timing of this. But I don't understand a lot of things that they do.
It's like the kid in school who doesn't do the homework, so you don't even get the F, you get the I for incomplete, and then you have to go and remedially fill it back in. It seems like that's what they're doing here. They they didn't get the project done on time, and now they're coming back to try to save it so they don't have to go to summer school.
I think it was last year, when you were pointing out, no, it was their training where they were
Yeah,
like
the sidewalk, the escort training.
the escort training, and it's just little stuff like really bad typos. I mean, I'm sure you can go through anything and find some kind of typo, but really obvious, typos, poor writing, not inspiring. And this was, I think, done in the same, with the same professionalism, as it were. So, okay, but let's just break it down. The number one thing that people need to know is that the number of clients they're serving is down by 80,000 people. So they lost 80,000 people. Okay. However, basically that means that they refocused and prioritized abortion, and that prioritization is at an all-time high for them, and they're not even trying to hide it. So despite losing 80,000 customers, they did more abortions than they've ever done. 392,715 abortions.
To put that in
Record.
perspective, that's like wiping out the entire city of New Orleans, and then you'd still have a few thousand lives to spare on top of that. That's the scale of the loss of life that Planned Parenthood was responsible for.
Yeah, when they say that they're the leader of reproductive rights, that means they kill more people. That's how that translates. And this is why they're the leader, because they by far do more abortions than any other entity. And I'd be interested to compare it to Maurice Stopes. If we threw Planned Parenthood International in there and we threw Maurice Stopes in there, Planned Parenthood still has to smoke them because of America, and they just own this abortion market. But Maurice Stopes does a lot of abortions around the world, as does Pro Familia, Planned Parenthood. But that would be interesting. So we're looking at about 400,000 abortions that were like 2 million clients.
Yeah, so what that means, that's the interesting thing. For years, Planned Parenthood had said, well, abortion is only 3% of the services that we provide. Then a couple of years ago, they admitted, okay, it's 4%. But what we see here is, do the math, 2 million clients and 400,000 abortions almost. We're talking nearly 20% of Planned Parenthood clients got an abortion during the year that this annual report covers. And so this is where we see the bundling of services come into play. Okay, well, we gave you an abortion and 12 months of birth control. I guess the abortion only counts as 1 out of 13 services provided, or something to that effect. But when 1 in 5 of their clients is getting an abortion, and almost none of them are getting anything resembling prenatal services, you put a lie to the myth pretty clearly that this is an abortion corporation, that's what they're in business for. That's their core product. This is not something they do on the sides while they're providing breast cancer exams. Again, no mammogram machines in a Planned Parenthood. This is their core product, and that's a lot of abortions.
Yeah, and this is something Cecile Richards started during her reign at Planned Parenthood, was getting away from prenatal care, getting away from mammograms. There's a famous scene where she's in a congressional hearing, and they said, does Planned Parenthood own a mammogram machine? Great question. Do y'all own one anywhere in the United States? And she said, no. She just kind of had this defeated no. And but they run around and they talk about breast cancer screenings and all this other stuff. So but in all fairness, they openly have de-emphasized that and said, we do abortions, we do a lot of abortions, that's where the money is, and that's what they're doing. We've tons of reports of Planned Parenthood referring women to pregnancy centers. If they don't want an abortion, they'll sometimes, I guess, humble themselves and refer to a local pregnancy center. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, this is sort of the transition year, 2021. You go into 2022, 2023, and we'll start to see the abortion numbers drop. I think that we'll see that. We'll see it because what we know is happening in places like Texas and Tennessee and Alabama and Florida is the birth rate's going up. And the birth rate can be monitored in direct correlation with the overturning of Roe. These abortion facilities no longer able to do abortions past 6 weeks or at all in some cases. And you see the birth rate going up, and that's loss of abortion business. The myth that women are mechanically programmed to just get on a train and go to California to get an abortion and that abortions won't go down is just that. It's a myth. Women don't really want to have an abortion. They sure as heck don't want to travel for one. And so I think that next year's will be very, very telling coming off the 392,000 abortions.
Yeah, they're really leaning into the abortion travel. We've talked about how that's overrated. And in spite of what we see in this report, I still think that is overrated. I think there are a lot of women who would be getting abortions, but are not because their states are protecting unborn children's lives. But they do say demand for abortion is up 700% in states where abortion rather than unborn children are legally protected. And they're now making travel arrangements for and or paying directly for the travel expenses of women to leave pro-life states and go to abortion sanctuary states. So they are leaning heavily into this, and that's it's not good news for unborn babies. But I think it is in some ways. I think this makes 40 Days for Life more effective because they're channeling women to get abortions in states that have the most 40 Days for Life campaigns. We talked about recently on the podcast how the blue states are where 40 Days for Life is thriving. You know, more than 50 campaigns at any given time in the state of California, tons of campaigns in New York, tons of campaigns in Washington state. And so you're channeling more and more women to fewer and fewer abortion facilities. And those abortion facilities typically are going to have a prayer campaign going on in front of them. And I think that's why we've seen a lot of success with sidewalk outreach. We've seen a lot of people trained to do sidewalk outreach at those locations, and we've seen a lot of turnarounds, lives saved, workers converted. This has been a great year for all of those numbers.
Yeah, it really has been, and we thrive more and are more popular, ironically, in places where they're more pro-abortion. But this, I'm going to call BS on one of these stats. So Planned Parenthood's claiming that abortion demand is up 700% in states where abortion is legally protected. That's a total made up number. They didn't even do like 717%. Like it's up 700% abortion demand in states where it's protected. Which is, I guess what they're saying is that all these women are traveling. And the demand, which you can't measure, are the sales up? Are the actual surgeries up? Like that's the number. And they probably are in some places, but they're up 700%. Like, did California have an abortion increase of 700%? Because that's what would be required if the demand were there. Like we've been saying, and it's true, the demand for 40 Days for Life is at an all-time high. And somebody says, well, what does that mean? We have more cities than we've ever had. We have more leaders than we've ever had. We're setting records every time we do a 40 Days for Life post-Roe. The demand is at an all-time high. And everybody's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But if you just say the demand for abortion is at an all-time high, well, are abortions going up in those places? And you'd really have to do it by state. And let's say they are. But they're going up 700%? Their 400,000 abortions don't even come close to showing that. So, and if that were,
you could account for that in California, like maybe Los Angeles County alone.
Yeah, but if the demand for anything goes up 10%, it's huge, right? In just basic economics. If it goes up 50% or 100%, like when Netflix exploded and Tesla exploded and Amazon exploded, and you just have these companies that are like big and everybody's heard of them, and then it's like everyone on earth has this now. Even those, I think the Tesla stock, when it burst, I think that was like a 300 or 400% increase. Okay. It's just made up. It's totally made up. And I'm glad we have it in the notes. But if you hear the abortion demand is up 700%, you can just be like, so's the demand for pro-life stuff. I mean, if they're just going to make stuff up, we can say, yeah, there's higher demand for Taco Bell than ever in our history. Well, is Taco Bell sales going up? I don't know. It just kind of sounds nice. So I thought that was so stupid. Okay. This is odd, and I don't think they've done this before, Steve.
I'm ready to dive into this one.
I'm going to hand it off to you, my friend. Alexis McGill Johnson and the board chair have this quote. We asked Planned Parenthood's 19 million supporters to write notes thanking providers for the care they or their loved ones got at Planned Parenthood health centers. So
lame.
You're asking your donors to write cards to the abortionists? Look, I know that they've gone nuts on the pro-abortion side, but those are just the people that are speaking on behalf, like Whoopi Goldberg and all these insane people. Most of the people that say, I don't like abortion, but I think, I don't want the government and healthcare. I think a woman should have access to it. They don't want to write a letter to an abortion doctor. They don't want to know his name. They don't want to. They would never do an abortion if they were at a cocktail party and they met a doctor and they're like, hey, what kind of medicine do you do? And he's like, well, I'm a late-term abortionist. They'd be like, okay, yeah, I support abortion. I'm moving over here. That's weird. That they don't want to do that. This is the weirdest thing that speaks to, Steve, abortion's not healthcare.
I think it's just pathetic. I think it's embarrassing when you have to reach out to your supporters and ask them to congratulate you on what you're doing. I mean, are we going to get on the podcast next and be like, hey, everybody, send your cards to Sean to tell him what a great job he does hosting it? We would tell our wives that and they would laugh at us and they would tell us to repent.
We would like you to send cards to Steve and I praising us and the podcast and the United States of America. Thank you. In all humility, we are making this request. It delegitimizes what they're trying to do. Again, I don't see Cecile Richards doing this garbage. She would be like, we're doing more abortions than ever before. Women are in more need than ever before. Send your money. Send your money. We're on the front lines. That's how she raised money. And then at the end of the letter, P.S. Donald Trump is evil and hates women. And they raised a fortune off that, Even after the David Daleiden scandal, they really recovered via the election of Donald Trump because Cecile knew what she was doing. Alexis McGill Johnson doesn't know what she's doing. I mean, it's bad.
So these client testimonials are about a quarter of the annual report. That's how substanceless it is. You've got the abortion numbers and you've got the financial stuff and you've got here's some stuff that they're doing, but we're talking a quarter of the report is these testimonials and they're kind of wild. We see continuation of the trend we've been seeing lately where everything is life-saving now and everything is either life-saving or it's genocide. There's no in between. These are the only two talking points we have left. And so Haley says in the annual report, I made a decision that I knew was best for me and my family. Planned Parenthood saved my life, honestly. Okay. Couple of things here. As we've said, saved lives is such a cliche at this point. It doesn't mean anything anymore. She says, I made a decision that I knew was best for me and my family. Like, that decision is obviously abortion, right? It doesn't say it, but what else would she be talking about? Other medical care is generally not, they're talking about abortion when they talk about this was best for me and my family. Abortion is a matter between a woman and her family or her doctor, whoever they decide it is in that given week, that it's between a woman and. The decision is abortion. We've asked this question before, and you've talked with a 40 Days for Life volunteer who sat out on the sidewalk in Orange, California, who just kind of asked the person, like, they didn't save your life, they killed your baby. We just say saved life as though nobody can question it. And abortion doesn't save lives, it ends lives.
Stay home, save lives, Steve. Remember that from COVID? I was wanting to be the first one to bring up COVID, which, as we discussed this,
like 6 in a row here, Sean. I'm going to feel that I have license to bring it up because it won't be me again next time.
It's the biggest government control. Save lives. I want to do that. Stay home, or we're going to arrest you. Woo! COVID was bad for our country. Okay, so yeah, the whole save lives. Everything is saving lives. Or everything is, if you don't get what you want, you're going to kill yourself. It's like these two extremes that we have right now.
We've got that one on the next testimonial here that we feature. Ruka, who is a trans woman, which I think means she's a dude who is pretending to be a woman. She said, as a trans woman, the services provided to me saved my life. I'll always stand by my sisters. Yep. Sisters in solidarity for our rights. Oh, you take this one, Sean. I don't want to talk about this.
That's the MO. So there's a recent study on the trans people and suicide, because they say, if you don't allow me, this is how parents get roped into it. Your kid thinks he's a girl. If he doesn't transition into a girl, we're worried he's going to kill himself. And the parents are like, I don't know what to do. And they commit the child abuse of butchering their child, thinking it will make him or her happy. The evidence shows the opposite. Those who fully go through the transition kill themselves at an alarming rate later on, after they've gotten the life they claim to want. The suicide rate shoots up. It's not the ones that decide not to do it or are prevented from doing it because it's not allowed. They're a minor. They're the ones that don't kill themselves, because obviously this goes against nature, and if you're trying to change your sex to make yourself happy, which is impossible. You're just a dude that got a bunch of surgery that's pretending to be a girl. That only makes anybody more insane. And that's what this study showed, is that that's what leads to suicide. But that's just suicide's a huge problem now, because we're all depressed and we've forgotten God and we have no meaning in our lives. We don't know why we're here, and we're just glued to the internet all day. So obviously I'm not downplaying suicide. But the problem with suicide rates going up is everybody's using suicide for whatever little cause they have, and
they're holding themselves hostage, literally.
Yes. And we don't do that. We don't believe in suicide. It's a sin. But the whole notion that we would like go to an abortion facility and be like, if you have an abortion, I'm going to go kill myself. They would completely ignore us. I mean, it's a sensational thing. And none of these testimonials would be on the website of like an orthopedic surgeon or anybody else. I mean, it's the most odd thing in the world. This last one, though, Planned Parenthood has done more for my reproductive freedom than I could ever repay. My daughter's future is worth fighting for. That's an interesting one, because my daughter's future will exist. We're assuming the daughter is alive because she wasn't aborted. And Planned Parenthood's done more for my reproductive freedom than I could ever repay. That's a scandalous comment, in my opinion, Steve. This is a G-rated podcast, but does anybody else read that?
Like, it sounds like a hitman type of thing.
No, like I don't. It's like I don't know. Planned Parenthood has done more for my reproductive freedom than I could ever repay. Well, what have they done? Well, they've allowed me to sleep with a ton of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first. Like, they've done more for my reproductive freedom than I could ever repay. They must have done a lot. And you must have a lot of reproductive freedom. And that creeps me out.
Yeah, the second part I think is equally disturbing here. The irony, the sense of irony that they either have and are very nefariously displaying, or this complete lack of awareness. I can't decide where on the spectrum I think it is. My daughter's future is worth fighting for. I agree your daughter's future is worth fighting for. That's why we want to save your daughter's life rather than allow you to continue to, exploit that so-called reproductive freedom. I don't know.
Yeah, no. You know what's great? Not killing folk. That's really great. It's a really great thing.
Speaking of irony here, I've got one more of these patient testimonials, which I think is hilarious, because a moment ago we covered Ruka, the transgender woman who's really a dude, who's thankful that Planned Parenthood saved her life by empowering her to pretend she's a woman. Here's one from page 13 from Shay. I have a chronic autoimmune disease. Planned Parenthood doctors were the only ones who explained that this disease affects women differently. So wait a minute, Sean. If trans women are women, at that point does the autoimmune disease like it somehow knows that you're trans and is going to attack you differently? How's that work?
Is Shay trans?
No, Shay isn't trans, but Ruka is. And so like the idea of like if you say you're a woman, you are a woman, does that affect the autoimmune disease? They're right here. They've got the biology right here. Yes, okay. So this autoimmune disease, it targets women differently, right? Because men and women are different.
I agree with you. But that was in the context of an abortion, though. Because Planned Parenthood doctors aren't there to diagnose autoimmune diseases. The other thing is that person just doesn't go to the doctor. Planned Parenthood doctors were the only ones who explained that this disease affects women differently. I just don't think they went to another doctor. Any doctor would say that. Any medical student would say that. I think anybody would say that. Do diseases affect people differently? Yeah. I don't know. It just wasn't profound. It was like, how do we put something that sounds medically good on the website? Here's what's not on there, Steve. And this is why we've been praising Bill Maher recently. What's not on there is I was sleeping with somebody. I got pregnant. I didn't want the baby. And I was grateful for the freedom to have an abortion. And Planned Parenthood did it. Or I'm shocked. Sexual assault or rape's not on there. My husband beats me and he got me pregnant. I don't think I can have another kid. I was so grateful to have my abortion. It's just amazing how their angles have changed. I mean, in their annual report, it's not the poor minority women who they're always parading around. It's not them being grateful for their abortion. It's the trans Ruka person with the made-up identity and the new made-up name saying that they saved my life with zero details given. It's just a change.
Yeah, I'd like to get the testimonials of the women that we see walk in. We do vigil at the Planned Parenthood on our college campus, and every Saturday morning it was the same thing. The women would walk in with their eyes just buried in the concrete, regretting what they had done the night before. And the dudes are either nowhere to be found or they're out there like celebrating and whooping it up and acting like imbeciles. We don't see those in the annual report, but that's what you see on the streets.
You also don't just see the normal testimonials that you would see for a place that does surgery. I mean, when I had my foot surgery or when I had, or that's really the only surgery I've had, but when somebody has heart surgery or something, you go to the website and it's the same thing. And it's something along the lines of, I had a lot of anxiety about this. I had heard some good things. I'd heard some bad things. I was nervous. The process couldn't have been better. The surgery couldn't have gone better. They were so professional. The kind staff was awesome. I love you, Sally. You were so sweet in my post-op. And that's the testimonials, and all surgeries have that because we have the internet. We're like, I was the day of my foot surgery, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this, because you hear all this stuff. And then I had the surgery. It was great. But that's how all those testimonials go. You don't hear that. And it would really work well for an abortion. I grew up pro-life. I didn't believe in abortion. When I became pregnant, I realized we needed to have this right. I had heard bad things. There are people in pain of an abortion. It could have been smoother. It only took 15 minutes. And I'm very grateful for Planned Parenthood. You don't have those. And that's what you have for every dentist, orthopedic surgeon, cardiovascular surgeon, oncologist. It's just loaded with all those reviews and testimonials. And they just had to go dig for these weirdo quotes. Anyways.
That's why they needed to tell 19 million people to send them in, and this was the best they could get.
That's true. With all due respect to Ruka. Okay.
Isn't that the vacuum cleaner that you don't need to drive around your house? It does it itself?
Is that a robo? Is it a
Ruka? Roomba.
Roomba.
Or that sounds like a like a dance. I don't know.
At least
I'm
Bruce
getting us off track
Jenner.
here.
I mean, Bruce Jenner, who I guess is like the father of all this garbage. At least he was like, "I'm Kate."
Yeah.
Like he didn't name himself after an appliance or anything or vacuum cleaner. Just gonna, you know. Um, okay. There's some legal issues. So it's a good thing we have the Institute of Law and Justice, because in this annual report, Planned Parenthood covers some of the things that they're doing on their end legally.
Yeah, Planned Parenthood litigators and coalition partners filed lawsuits against abortion bans in a total of 20 states within a year of Dobbs. And so we know Planned Parenthood has they put a lot into lawyers, because this battle, as Matt Britton has said, is no longer the battle it was before Roe. It's now a legal battle in so many cases, because you've got different laws in 50 states. It's no longer Roe being the law of the land in universally. And so they right now, at least as of the publication of this annual report, 30 different cases open in 16 states and federally. So they are very active in the courts. They're going to sue all day long. They're going to throw up every legal roadblock to saving unborn children's lives. And that's why it's so critical that we have Matt and Dwight and Dr. Donato and April and the whole crew at the Institute of Law and Justice, because these are folks who are the best of the best, and they're going to go head to head, toe to toe with Planned Parenthood's best of the best attorneys. And we need to give those babies a fighting chance in the courts.
Yeah, well, we do, and we are. We just won another case actually for defending one of our local volunteers, who had the false charges dropped. The propaganda is always flowing through these reports. They launched a new multi-platform campaign sharing emotional abortion stories.
Yeah, I think this is sort of, they've corrected some of the errors that they made with that "I had an abortion" t-shirt campaign they had years ago, or the "Shout Your Abortion" movement. And now they're telling the sad stories of, oh, I wanted my baby, but my baby had an illness, and so I had to kill my baby. They're sharing the stories where allegedly I was going to die if I didn't get an abortion, even though none of the women suing Texas because they couldn't get an abortion died. I think they've become more effective in their sort of emotional manipulation over social media. They had 35 million people who they reached on social media. That's important, because that's where young people are getting their news. I don't like that. I think it's like a terrible way to get your news. But that's where people are getting their news, and they're reading this Planned Parenthood propaganda online, and a lot of these sad stories, and the empathy engine kicks in, and before you know it, you've got people like, yeah, I don't want an abortion ban in my state because this woman, she had a, and I think they're doing a good job of it. I hate to admit that, but I think it's been much more effective than the "Shout Your Abortion" campaign of days past.
Yeah, I think they're doing a great job at it. I think unfortunately, they're doing a great job at it. And they've always, whether there was a ban or some law, they've always taken the sob story and said they want to ban all abortions, they want to lock women up, they want to do all this, and it's effective. It's very, very effective, and you'll really silence men. Men just immediately get,
Yeah.
because there's two classes. There's, well, if I get a girl pregnant, I want her to be able to have an abortion, even if I don't believe in abortion. So those are just the bad men who, as we've said, are the winners in abortion. But then you have the men that are like, I don't know, what am I supposed to say? I'm pro-life, but like, I wasn't raped at 15 and needed an abortion, until you walk in their shoes. And that's how they sort of isolate people, and definitely get people scared of voting for or against abortion rights.
And that's why we're countering it too, right? If you get Day 41 magazine, you can get it for free quarterly in the US, 40daysforlife.com/magazine, or you listen to this podcast, or you get the 40 Days for Life emails, however it is you're getting 40 Days for Life stuff. We're telling the stories too that show you got assaulted and you became pregnant through that assault, and you overcame. We had Rowan on this podcast who was assaulted while out jogging. It left her pregnant. She chose life. She was the valedictorian of her college class. She's going to be a doctor. We can fight fire with fire on this, because I think there's many more stories of women triumphing because they chose life than who are responding to a 19 million person invitation to send in your client testimonials. I think that we engage in true and accurate storytelling, the truth is going to rise to the top.
Yeah, we also engage in scientific reality and biological reality, and that's why we don't have the vague like I want to fight for the future of my daughter and all that. And it's like, is there anything wrong with abortion or not? Is there wrong with abortion at 40 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks? If can we do infanticide? You know, if you're gonna we get into it and they don't. And that's why the testimonials are so vague. But these women with the stories that we send out say, and I didn't have the abortion, and now I have a 6-year old, and she's the love of my life, and I don't regret it, and the world didn't end, or I gave my baby up for adoption after I was raped, or whatever it is. And there's an event, and the event is not killing the baby, not having the abortion. And the event the other way is killing the baby and getting the abortion. And that's what we have to decide, is that event good or bad? And what they say is, well, it depends if you want the baby. And that's a very scary thing, because now our will has granted you or stripped you of your dignity. And that's what abortion survives on.
The thing about our stories too, Sean, is ours are real. They're organic. These are women who are choosing life, and they are coming of their own initiative and volition to the 40 Days for Life volunteers on the sidewalk and telling us that they chose life, that they're happy about it, that they were here 6 months ago or 2 years ago or 10 years ago. And here's the photo of my little boy. I've got it on the phone. All these things are just legitimate. They're honest. And a lot of, I think, these pro-abortion testimonials, they're kind of planted. You probably remember the headlines right after Roe was overturned. There was a tragic story of the 10-year-old rape victim who got pregnant, and she had to go, she had to go allegedly to Indiana to have an abortion. And okay, there's a lot to unpack in that story, and we could do perhaps a whole podcast on that story. But what does it say that Roe's overturned the very next day that abortion doctor is on the stage doing a pro-abortion advocacy rally, and then a few days later, she just happens to be the one who's reporting the story of the 10-year-old rape victim from Ohio? I'm not denying that the story is real, but I think these stories are kind of planted. They're not coming to us organically. They're not grassroots. There's a professional activist class here who is sort of harvesting these stories and using them for their benefit. And, interestingly enough, that doctor in Indiana who did that abortion on that 10-year-old girl was later fined and reprimanded for violating patient privacy to go and exploit this 10-year-old rape victim to advance abortion in the wake of the overturning of Roe. We don't have to deal with those issues at 40 Days for Life. The women come to us and they say, thank you.
Yeah, they say thank you. And here's the other thing is that what do we send out? 10% of our stories? I mean, we just have so many. But there are so many that tell us I was going to have an abortion. I knew it was wrong. I didn't want to do it. I saw y'all standing out here. I was so grateful you're here. And I'm due in November, or I have a 2-year-old, or I have a 16-year-old, is one kid I met. Like, that's awesome. That happens all the time. We don't have to go searching for all these random testimonials. It's absolutely beautiful because it's natural. It's natural. That's what's so important. That's why one of the reasons we wrote What to Say When is this is easy. We should be comfortable talking about this, and they shouldn't be. They should be uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. And we're kind of seeing that now. So we've recently been talking about, Bill Maher's like, yeah, it is murder. I mean, of course it is.
This is the other half of the propaganda machine too, is it's not just what they're saying, it's what they won't allow to be said. And we see Planned Parenthood getting involved in deep censorship here because the annual report is boasting on they had a gathering of major tech companies to address, quote, misinformation around sexual and reproductive health. And that's probably why, as you watch this podcast on YouTube, it's got the little disclaimer saying, don't believe what these guys say about abortion. Abortion is a medical procedure designed to end pregnancy, and it's safe and it's legal and it's great. But this is Planned Parenthood openly admitting to collusion with big tech to try to shut down one side of the debate. That's not American. That's not what we do in this country.
No, and ironically, it's exactly why Elon Musk bought Twitter. When he was asked, why did you do it? He said, quote, I don't want to sound overly dramatic, but I did it to save civilization. So I don't I don't I don't know, what else to say. So you've heard me talk about my best friend Chris, Steve, and he's been my best friend since the 5th grade. And so for a while he's always had like cool jobs, but he was a pretty high level like stockbroker. Okay. So I remember, I don't know, he'd switch firms or something, and we were talking about the Dallas Cowboys or something we're always talking about. But anyways, I was asking about his job because he's always cool. He's always doing cool stuff. And so, anyways, he was telling me about his job as a stockbroker, and then he stopped like giving me his update, and he wanted to ask me about my job. And so he goes, yeah, so how's saving mankind from self-destruction going? And I was like, good. They had a good year. But it was just funny the way he worded that. And it is. It's like, it sounds a little dramatic, but that's a problem. Planned Parenthood going and meeting with big tech. This is what they got in trouble with the election. And you can say, we're not going to get into the whole election fraud thing. But one of the things that has been validated is that on social media, there was censorship. And I don't know if that can throw an election, who knows? But in all these battleground states where it's so close, if you can block out one side on Facebook, which happened, that's substantive. That's significant. And that's not what those platforms are for. And so God bless Elon for just saying, you know what, I'll buy Twitter. At least we have one that's fair. But yeah, that should be concerning to people. Okay, real quick, the money, just shy of $700 million in taxpayer funding. I think it was, when did they first hit 500 million? I think it was 17 or 18 that they first crossed $500 million. It's not a long time ago. They're already at 700 million. They must love them some Biden. Private contributions is up 44% from the previous year.
That's got to be the Dobbs effect, huh? Yeah, they're just reacting.
Totally. Even though they did a crappy job, in my opinion, of fundraising off that. We've talked about that before. Like,
yeah,
we just didn't see a lot of fundraising stuff from them. And then they did the fake bus thing. They didn't even end up doing the buses, but they were sending out these models of the mobile RVs and all that nonsense, which never happened. But the number of donors is down 21%. Okay, so looking at that, if you were a donor with Planned Parenthood the last few years and Roe was overturned, you gave more. But they lost a lot of donors. Am I reading that correctly? Or
that's what it appears to say.
And people may be like, well, they're losing money because they're poorly run and all that. That may be part of it, but honestly, Planned Parenthood donations go down when a Democrat's elected to the presidency. And so Biden is taking that money because the typical big government liberal is like, well, they're going to take care of them. The government will fund Planned Parenthood, which they did. They had a 10% increase with the 700 million. And so they're basically like, well, evil Trump's not in power, so Planned Parenthood's not getting hated on every day, so we'll give them a lot of money. And then when Biden takes over and the Democrats take over, their donors, typically a portion of them will go away. And we see that. We see that with Planned Parenthood and elections for the last few decades. And there are some pro-life groups, not us, thankfully, because it doesn't matter who's president. Our work is laid out for us. But there are certain groups that I know that are pro-life that if a Republican wins, their donations go down because people think, oh, the politicians are going to solve all the problems, which is a mistake, as we have learned. Republicans don't always do that. That's news to anyone. Okay.
It's worth noting here, I don't know where this fits into the report. March of 2022, Mackenzie Bezos, the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos from Amazon, gave 275 million to Planned Parenthood. So that's the type of gift that could explain your overall revenue is up, but your number of donors is down.
That's exactly right. No, it's going to skew the numbers because that had to be the largest gift of the history of Planned
It
Parenthood.
was, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And this is where like all the news reports just report it straight up. I don't know, like, did she just write a check for 275 million? I don't know. Was it a pledge over time? I don't know. But I think it's just illustrative that you can have some of these elitists with billions of dollars at their disposal to put toward their progressive causes can kind of skew and make it look like there's a more grassroots, widespread donor base than there really is. The fact that they went down after Dobbs is pretty wild. Like in total number of donors is a wild thing in my opinion. They should be able to ride that Dobbs train for a decade or more, and it's petering out in a way.
Yeah, yeah, and no, it is petering out, and this is important, as you know, Steve. We don't have the Hollywood elites sending us money, but it's the advantage. One of the advantages of 40 Days for Life and how we're obviously privately funded. We have not gotten the $700 million check from the government, but it's the $50 a month, $20 a month, $10 a month, sending $100 and having it matched when we do those webcasts. That has really carried 40 Days for Life and built it. We have a wide base. Our volunteers give, which is so awesome. And so stock market's up, great. Stock market's down, we'll survive because we have a very wide donor base of people that give the smaller gifts. But, obviously, if the Bezos lady had a conversion and wanted to give us $200 million, that'd be great. But when you have those kinds of gifts, it does skew your numbers, and you don't know, particularly if it's lump sum. I mean, is she going to do that every year? Is she going to do it once every 5 years? It can really, overall, it's probably awesome for Planned Parenthood, but it can discourage smaller donors because they're like, well, the government's giving them a lot of money, and Bezos is giving them money, or the wife of, and so it's just different. Okay, you couldn't help but put this in the outline. There is a letter from leadership that revisits COVID. Please let me be the one to read this quote.
Go for it.
The COVID-19 pandemic upending our healthcare system and ending far too many lives.
They can't get over it either. They're still blaming it. I think the context here is they're blaming all of the troubles at Planned Parenthood, continuing to be like, well, we just had the worldwide pandemic. Getting tired of it.
So the CDC, we all know now the COVID death numbers were totally made up.
You don't trust them?
And nobody got the flu that year. It was unbelievable. Nobody died of the flu that year. So there was, and I have personal experience. There was a friend who we knew, and he died, and it was not COVID. He did not have COVID, and it was listed as a COVID death at the hospital. And his wife's like, he didn't have COVID. He had like a heart problem. They're like, no, it was COVID because the pandemic is going on. I was like, but he just died. Anyways, I'm sure the listeners don't have any stories like that. Okay. So the CDC says that 1.2 million Americans died of COVID. Even if that were true, that's like barely higher than the number of abortions every year.
Yeah, in one year.
We're Planned Parenthood's worried about COVID. They're worried about COVID because it ended far too many lives, which is obviously the big problem with abortion. It's ending a lot of lives. Okay. Yes, other little nuggets for the listeners. 100, just under 124,000 telehealth appointments.
Wouldn't you have thought a lot more than that? I was really surprised that if they're claiming millions upon millions of appointments, and we've got the new like webcam abortions, popping up in more places and everything, I just expect this number to be much, much higher, particularly in the wake of the aforementioned COVID, where everything has gone virtual. I thought that number would be way higher.
Yeah, with COVID, with the abortion pills, that's a shockingly low number. Especially they're saying they served 4 million people.
Yeah.
And 125,000 of them were telemed. I mean, that's
pretty
a
small
shocking
fraction.
number. That'll be a number to watch, though, in the coming years. 35 Planned Parenthood affiliates offered depression screening. That's strange. I didn't know they did that.
Yeah, it's going to come in useful, I suppose, when their core product is associated with an 81% increase in mental health episodes.
That's a lot of stuff on that T-shirt.
Yeah.
Transgender services were down 30%. Now, I have said, now that's still way up from like 2 years ago, but 2 years ago, trans became like the coolest thing ever. But it's starting to go down. Definitely seeing that in Europe. I've been saying the whole like they're gonna make a ton of money on the transgender stuff. I don't buy that. They're not gonna replace their abortion business. They're gonna throw some Hail Marys and try to do it, try to raise money, try to say Texas is evil, send us money. But I think we're gonna see a lot of abortion facilities close. You can't do tens of thousands of abortions in these states and then do 1,000 or 500 because of the laws. You can't survive. You can transition all the people you want, but it's not going to make up for that income, is my guess. And that's really good to see. Their transgender services are down 30% because the last couple of years they've been shooting up. So, anyways, we'll do a quick recap, and then Steve, if you have any closing comments. But the big number, 392,715 abortions, even though the number of clients was down 80,000. So they're cutting out prenatal stuff. They're cutting out, quote, the services to women, and they're doing abortions, and they're doing it with a record at a record level, unfortunately. They're getting weird with their testimonials. We will not cover that. They're filing lawsuits like never before. They're coming after our free speech. And they got a record $700 million from the federal government, which is just unbelievable. But their private contributions are up from the previous year, but the number of donors is down. So some of those big givers, those big donors are pushing the numbers up, but they're actually losing donors. Okay, that pretty much is the highlight of the report. Their report is never good. Their report should call us to prayer. And I will say, Steve, you haven't said it, but shame on the 2017 Republicans. After Trump got in, he wanted to defund Planned Parenthood. They didn't do it. And now I don't think any of them have the guts to do it. I don't think that they want to do it. I think they're terrified of abortion. And I believe that the funding of Planned Parenthood battle is darn near over. I don't see a way in a post-Roe America where any politicians to a substantive level are going to have the guts to defund Planned Parenthood. But I'd be interested in your take on that.
Well, I mean, we just saw the state of Arizona get rid of their law from the 1800s protecting unborn babies, essentially legalizing abortion when it was illegal. And we saw Republicans in both the House and the Senate in Arizona vote to legalize abortion in the state. And so, yeah, it's going to be an uphill battle the way the politicians are right now.
Yeah, they got weaker with victory. Yeah.
It's not going to look good in 100 years.
It's not. It's not. So strength should build on strength, and that did not happen with the overturning of Roe. And so, but we're still strong. Steve is still strong. More campaigns than ever before. More volunteers than ever before. Be sure, if you're not on our email list, to get on the email list. We will have a lot coming out soon after the airing of this podcast on our lawsuit against the DOJ on behalf of Mark Houck and his family. So that has been filed or is about to be filed. We filed the notice of claim 6 months ago, which is what you have to do when you sue the federal government. So they get 6 months to prepare. So the 6 months is up, and now the lawsuit is being filed, and we will have many developments on that. So be sure to get Day 41 magazine if you don't get it. Get on our mailing list, get on our email list so that you have those updates, because there will be a lot coming in the next few weeks and throughout the summer. So be sure to check that out. So thank you, Steve. Please rate, review, and share this podcast, and we will see you next time. God bless you.